Good morning, everybody. And Bruce, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this workshop here and this panel discussion as well. And the issue of frictions and momentum, as Bruce says, i.e. Challenges and opportunities as well. I caught the last 5 minutes or so of the last session, the last panel discussion itself, particularly when it came time for questions and comments, as it were. It's kind of intriguing to me that some of the comments that were made, and I thought to myself as I stood in the back there against the door, that much of the questions and much of the comments that were made, sorry if I'm going to pick on whoever made those comments, but it sounded like it was, we need to continue to talk amongst ourselves. And I think that's the huge challenge that we've got as an enterprise, scientific enterprise, that we end up talking amongst ourselves primarily. And secondarily, oh, by the way, there might be a news report or a news release or whatever else that's done. And the other comment that was made as well was, has any one of the scientists been profiled in various outlets? And I can tell you, Eric Stuckstad, some of you might know Eric at Science Magazine, has indeed done that. And in the food and agricultural, natural resources, human sciences world that I'm part of, he's definitely not only talked about the science that's been done. For example, Carol Mallory Smith has worked on the risk of genetically modified crops. She's at Oregon State University. She was one of my faculty members when I was at Oregon State. And she was profiled by Eric, not just for her research, but as a person, what drives her. So that was fantastic, and I actually sent a note to Eric saying, thank you very much for doing this. We need to do a lot more of this. But then again, I thought about it. Well, who reads Science Magazine? For the most part, it is scientists that end up reading it. And what's the possibility that this sort of profiling and things like that happens actually in the mass media, as it were? That's the local television station or the newspapers and things like that. A lot of the work that we end up doing is shrouded in secrecy. It's a well-kept secret is what it is. And we've got to figure out how best to go ahead and unveil this shroud that we've got as well. And for example, if you go and ask the average person in North Carolina about North Carolina State University, I see my buddy Fred Gould sitting in the back there, so I thought I'd use a North Carolina State University example, as it were. Ask them, hey, what was the latest basketball scores of the game that they played against Duke or University of North Carolina? And the average person on the street in North Carolina is going to be able to tell you what the scores were. Indeed, they'll go right down the depth chart, as it were, tell you a little bit about the players, tell you a little bit about the scores that they made, etc. Okay, and then you ask that same person, so what do you think North Carolina State University did to deal with pig poop? And I dare say that's not going to be very many people that are going to be able to answer that question. So therein lies our challenge that we've got as well, is the inability to frame what we do in the scientific enterprise that the average person on the street says, oh my gosh, that is so fantastic. NC State folks figured out how to deal with poop. And we don't, brag about it. We don't put them on a pedestal, but we do put the ball players on a pedestal, as it were. And so there is this sort of shroud of secrecy. What are we doing to address these things? And what are the opportunities that we've got? Really, again, in the comments made at the end of the last panel, I heard that, should the communications piece of it, where should it come in? And for the most part, from my experience for the last many, many years at multiple institutions, has been, it's an afterthought. The communications piece of it, the research is already done, there's some discovery that's been made, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to do this press release, as it were. Rather than having the communications people sitting on the front end, and that's what we started doing at Purdue University when I was there, and then I followed that at Oregon State, and I do it now in my agency at NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, is to have the comps people sitting in at the inception of the idea of what that science is going to be all about, the research is going to be about, et cetera, so that they're coming along very nicely and issues are dealt with. Another thing that about communications is the land-grant universities particularly, and the colleges of agriculture specifically, for all of these decades have had very strong agricultural communications offices and staffs. And these folks are not just somebody that puts out a press release from time to time, but these are folks that actually undertake serious thinking about this. They're professionals, they're very thoughtful, many of them even have PhDs, many of them have scientific background, and they've gotten into the writing business. They help translate all of this wonderful science that's been done. Unfortunately, particularly in the last decade or so, with the ensuing economic downturn, the comms people were the first ones to be eliminated. And what I did was, and I started doing that in Oregon, was to change that around. I wanted to keep my comps people in place before I started letting others go as well. And I think that's sort of a commitment that we've got to figure out how to make. And to Bruce's point, for an enterprise in the United States, the U.S. government's investments in public research, as it were, of several tens of billions of dollars, we're spending a sum total of $124 million on this enterprise. It's mind-boggling to me that that's the amount of money that we're spending on communications. No wonder we've got a country blessed with incredible media, and yet we're one of the most illiterate when it comes to science literacy itself. And I think we've got something to really think about and step back and really start worrying about this as well. My agency, what we do is, and in the land-grant universities, they offer training to their faculty, media training. And we also, oh, by the way, the average American, there was a study that was published, is exposed to 34 gigabytes of information per day. 34 gigabytes, that's about 110,000 words or something like that per day. It's a mind-boggling exposure to this unbelievable noise that's out there. And what do we do about the signal-to-noise ratio is something I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. We've also created policy centers that are addressing these sorts of questions about what does it take for us to be able to convey to the public the return on investment that is taking place in terms of the kind of discoveries that are being made as well. And we've also, my agency, by the way, has provided, not unlike what NSF does, we've provided funding for creation of apps on smartphones and tablets. This is pertaining to, let's say, nutrition and obesity, and creating, games, as it were. So the kids are really interested now. It's being done at Louisiana State University, being done at New Mexico State University, UC Davis, and other places where we've provided funding for those to be developed. And the idea that you're, enabling young people to start becoming more aware. These are whodunits, etc. That's about pest management. That's about all of these other enterprises as well that we've tried to do. So I was asked to actually speak to Extension as a model for life sciences communication. And so I want to walk you through what Extension does, and particularly in regards to communication itself. And if this guy moves, it's not moving. Oh, there you go, over there, sorry. Yeah, so just a bit of history for those of you that might be in the audience that may not be at land-grant universities, that may not know anything about cooperative extension. This guy right here, Seaman A. Knapp, is a fellow that used to live back in the 1800s and passed away in the early 1900s. He is considered to be the father of what we know as cooperative extension service in the United States. This incredible enterprise at land-grant universities that takes the knowledge that's being discovered, translates that into innovations. Those innovations are delivered to the end users, and then those end users are able to deploy those innovations in the form of solutions to the problems that they're facing. And this might be in food production, it might be in the old home economics type effort, nutrition, health literacy, financial literacy, on and on and on. This has been going on now for 100 years. In fact, next year, 2014, is the centennial of the Cooperative Extension Service. The premise in the Cooperative Extension Service is that it's a partnership. And the partnership is between the federal government, the state government, and the local government, along with the farmers and folks that are actually doing the day-to-day type operations, as it were. And Extension is located in every one of the 3,144 counties, parishes, and boroughs that we've got in America. Extension has a portal in every one of those. And they're able to get knowledge from these land-grant universities, translate that, and deliver that. They serve in the local communities, they serve on panels, they serve on county commissions, et cetera, et cetera. So they're able to translate science into operational types of enterprises. They help understand policies and things like that too. And literally, their role is to engage, their role is to translate, and their role is to transform. That's a critical type of an effort that the extension community undertakes. And inherent in that is the ability to translate that information so that people understand how it affects them. Again, I want to go back to North Carolina State University. We're talking about poop out there and pigs and things like that. You have what are called as CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations. These are large concentrations of pigs or cattle being raised. And Communities want to know how to deal with it. You have a new development that comes along, you got the smell of poop, you got the flies coming, the particulates in the air, and bacteria and things like that. How do we deal with it? It is the extension community that helps those folks understand what the science is going to allow them to do. So the folks at North Carolina State University are taking serious science and addressing the problems that are happening on the ground, as it were. So here's a bit of a history of the sort of communication tools that Extension has used. And I want you to go from the left-hand side over there. Back in the 1870s, we used to do what are called as farmer field schools. And albeit it was focused at farmers, but it's about everybody, not just farmers. And then along the way, we had agricultural demonstration farms, the Smith-Lever Act that created Cooperative Extension Service. And then particularly in the early 1900s, they used to use lantern slides. They used to use, I don't know if any one of you has ever seen a lantern slide. In front of a lantern, you had a 3x3 piece of glass with a positive image on it. And they would, rather than having an LCD projector or an LED projector, they would project those things. They would do demonstrations. They would do tours. And you could hop on the back of a trailer and be hauled around seeing what was going on. They brought in the community. It was not just the farmers and others. They brought in the school kids, the community in that local community to go through. And, you know, with the evolving technologies, Extension stayed with it, you know, with the radio on up into the 1970s. You got all these different types of enabling capabilities that become available: electronic, digital imaging, distance diagnostics, the internet, and podcasts, Extension COPS, E-Extension, pardon me, COPS, this thing right here. This is communities of practice. This is to crowdsource the best knowledge to address the challenges that you've got. Not just the individual Extension person that's in that small community, but to crowdsource literally from the region or from the United States. There are a whole bunch of these communities of practice that get together to address these questions, that are able to take that knowledge, translate that, and deliver to the end users as well. And then on into today, you got MOOCs, you know, the massively open online courses, and Moodle. Moodle is a very significant opportunity for us to use tools that are available that can be used to develop the knowledge and to pass that along. So that gives you